Okay. We are expecting 4 more people. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, how does this work? Put you guys live for the moment and ask you all to introduce yourselves, and maybe by the time you're done, our 4 people will be here. We'll start for real in 10 minutes, whether they're here or not. But we do have this canonical, you get 10 minutes grace policy here at the university. We are, after all, dealing with 18-year-old post-adolescents. Expecting punctuality is way too irrational. I mean, I don't think any of you are high school teachers, but just remember, it's just been a few years. Their behavior doesn't change that much. Okay, I'm Edgar Bering, and I will very briefly give you a psychology review. You're not. I'd like to introduce our team here. This is Ken Neeser, who is our reading instruction expert, who will take us through some of the formal curriculum materials, and Dr. Laura Jacobs, who is in the throes of a phenomenon known to every graduate student, colloquially described as now what? You don't expect to ever graduate, so you never plan for that. So I would like to ask all of you to introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, what grades you teach, and stuff like that while we wait for our 4 late arrivals.
I'm Rich Kreckler. I teach 8th grade science at Memorial Middle School in Springfield, Tennessee.
Thereby hangs a tale. I'll get back to you. Yes.
I'm Kathy Decay. I teach 7th and 8th grade science at Duchesne Academy.
Hi. You've been here before.
I personally have not. My 2 of my colleagues have, and I really felt at a disadvantage where I didn't have the training. I think my students would compete as well unless I knew a little bit more of what I was doing.
Always good. Welcome. Yeah, I got an awful lot of email from Kathy last year, so
Actually, I think you got more from Kira.
Kara is sufficiently well prepared. I actually asked her to help with this workshop one year.
I'm Randy Williams. I teach 6th grade science at Conroe ISD, intermediate school.
I'm Marcy Stinville. I teach 6th grade science at a gifted and talented academy in Fairlane.
My name is Richard Embrick, and I teach 6th grade robotics and engineering and 7th and 8th grade project legal way. And it's in Richmond, Texas.
I'm Kathy Heyman. I teach 8th grade science and STEM. Well, 7th and 8th grade STEM, right? I think about that for this year. And I teach in Barboursville, in Mont Bellevue, one of his A-Town.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we got Keegan Small. I'll tell you.
I'm Nisa Mendez. I also work for Barboursville. I teach 7th grade science and then 7th and 8th grade science.
I'm Saida Chaplin, instructional coach for Stevens Elementary and Katy, and for the math and science component.
Okay. Well, now this is being recorded, and I'd like to ask all of you, I'm going to have Laura take a few pictures. Would you mind if those pictures were shared with NASA? Okay, if anyone who does will just sort of crop you out or replace you with an image of Chewbacca or something. I'm so glad to see you. Part of the history of the Mars Rover program, which I wasn't going to address till about noon but I have to address now. Mars Rover was originally written. Um, let's see, where am I supposed to be? Okay, this. Okay. I didn't want to do that. I was hoping that wasn't the first slide. Mars Rover was originally written in Tucson by a woman named Thea Canicio and her colleague Larry Lebowski. And they're now friends of mine. I actually ended up teaching a teacher training workshop for the Tucson community this past summer, which would seem crazy, except that particular day was cooler in Tucson than it was here. Rational people don't go to Tucson in July. That was really serious imposter syndrome, because I was in what one might regard as the mothership for planetary science in this country, the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory at the University of Arizona, and I was actually teaching in Kuiper Auditorium, named after Gerard Kuiper, who's also has the Kuiper Belt named after him. And this is like, okay, I am not worthy. But it was brought here through most of you I think are familiar with the Spark Park program. The Spark Park is a program out of the mayor's office, and it's been going so long, I think it's kind of saturated, but the mayor's office provides money to refurbish your school, re-landscape your school, and add some curriculum enrichment if you allow your playground to be used as a park after school hours. And one of the my children are alumni of your school. And one of the schools that took advantage of the Spark Park program is Benwood Elementary. And they picked up on this curriculum, which at that point was being handled through an NEA, NSF grant by JPL, which was terminated for weird political reasons that no one really understands by the Bush administration. But it came to Houston and to SBISD through the Spark Park program. And my children did it in 4th grade. So understand that I am a soccer parent run amok. And when my children were in 6th and 8th grade, respectively, it was the first year we did this here at the university, and we were able to, and they were both at your school, we were able to get your school to give it that year and for another 2, and then it sort of died. And I have occasionally, when Mary Grace Landrum was on your board of trustees, her husband went to middle school and high school with my wife. My son's a really good cook, and his best friend was Teresa Kosmowski's son. So he became Teresa Kosmowski's barbecue chef. So I thought maybe with that kind of connection to the Board of Trustees, I could really grow the program in SBISD, and nobody was interested. It was like, so that's why I'm really glad to see you. And the other part of that tale is that when my children finally graduated, knowing very closely several members of the Board of Trustees, they try really hard to make sure that nobody misbehaves during graduation. And there is a long list of rules. My children read the rules very carefully. Nowhere did it say you can't hug a trustee. So they decided that what they would do is establish an unofficial competition amongst the students to hug for score. So my son walked across the stage, and the first thing he did was hugged his level principal. Then he hugged 3 trustees. Then he hugged the main principal. I think the main principal may have smelled a rat, but there was nothing he could do at that point. So, and since bearing is pretty high up in the alphabet, then the rest of slowly the class caught on, you know. Oh. So it was a slow commencement because they couldn't figure out how to tell the kids, don't hug the trustees. In fact, I think Ms. Cole, the grade principal, was kind of touched by it all. She thought it was funny. Okay. Well, we're 10 minutes in, and I guess our 4 late people will be really late. Three? One has come. Okay. Okay, so we're... Mars Rover is an enrichment program for grades 3 through 8, aimed at really creating a much higher level of excitement about science and engineering than contemporary programs do. Mars Rover Celebration begins with the children researching Mars and choosing a question to investigate that interests them. Once they have their question, the teams decide how they're going to address their question. They design a rover to answer the question. They then build that rover out of what we charitably call art supplies.
This is the satellite on the rover. This is the propeller to help the planet. You got a strong will.
Rather than starting from a problem somebody else defined, this competition starts with the participants deciding what they want to do with the rover. They come up with their own mission objectives.
I think that events like this are incredibly important because our youth need something to inspire them, something that's cool to do other than just sitting in a classroom, reading a textbook, getting talked to by their teachers. It's a lot more fun to go put your hands on something, and when you're having fun, you learn better.
Our mission is to send plants to Mars, and the way we're going to do that is plants along this terrarium here.
Our line item is funded by state dollars. And what we are required to do with those line item dollars is basically try to filter that back in, not just in higher education, but K through 12. And this is a way to prepare those students to actually come to the University of Houston as being critical thinkers. And I think the kids have a great time, and it really takes them back to loving learning and not.
I didn't mean to do that. Wait. Now what have I done?
Not having to memorize things for tests or not having to figure out what it is the answer somebody wants. It's their answer that they're going to give you because it's their imagination and their creativity.
The students have such rigor in the classroom and such structure that they don't always get to be who they are. We don't get to see that character come out in them. And so through these programs, we're able to see what they're able to do, the creativity they have, and let their imagination take over.
My son, he's thrilled. He loves science, but this brings it to life. And it's a real world application. And who doesn't like something that has to do with outer space?
I've seen students who got involved and got excited every day to participate in this after school that I never would have guessed would have been interested in this type of program.
Yeah, and so it's supposed to how to the rocks as well. I got more knowledge by learning more facts and everything, and I got to do something for the weekend, and I got to spend time with my friends.
I had fun with my friends, and I learned a lot of interesting facts about Mars.
I had fun with it, and I learned how to I almost learned how to program stuff, and I felt like I was an engineer making a rover, and it was actually going to go on Mars.
Well, this is hugely important for the children. We're living in a time where funding is tight for everything, especially for any extracurricular activities. And so any programs that we have that can get children's interest peaked in science and engineering and math is just crucial for them.
Okay, maybe I'll just turn it over to Ken here. Ken is going to work you through the curriculum. The one thing I want to say while he's coming up is some teachers sometimes get the impression that this is a craft activity that can be accomplished in a few hours. And that's somewhat true. You could approach it that way, but we have designed and written with NASA money a 15-lesson 5E standards aligned lesson plan featuring an essential question, key vocabulary words, and reading strategies around the whole concept. And the core of the concept is the teams pick their own mission, and then they have to come up with how you answer it, which is a remarkably difficult thing to teach, because what you're teaching them is the structure of answering a question, which is the real heart of the scientific method, not the little circle that we all memorized once upon a time, and which, much to my utter astonishment, I've never actually done. And I've got 500 scientific publications to my name now. So yeah, it's a true curriculum that is designed for a 6 week 5 45-minute periods. But you can mix and match and modify, compress, put it in the after hours to suit yourselves. But the curriculum is now fully NASA. Well, it will be as soon as I mail the replies back, but we've complied fully with all the recommendations of the referees. So what you see will ultimately be fully NASA approved. It's half NASA approved now. So,
we're ready?
Yeah, you have to use the page up and page down keys, and for some reason,
Okay,
this is not showing where we are.
that's okay. I can handle it. I know the presentation well enough
Okay.
to do that. Nice to have the cheat sheet of the notes on the page, on the screen, but I think I can handle it without. Good morning. Again, my name is Ken Easter. I also work at the University of Houston here. About 3 years ago, my boss, Dr. Carlene Carlson, asked me if I would be interested in writing some curriculum for the Mars Rover program. And I was very, very excited for the prospect of being able to do that. And I have the privilege of working with Elena Slagle, who's a science teacher in Belgium, Washington. And we collaborate weekly over the phone for the past 3 years, working through the curriculum. She's the science expert, and I work on the language and reading arts section. So what we did is we really did a unique collaboration, because good scientists need good language arts background. They have to be able to do research. They have to be able to write competently. They have to be able to present in a professional manner. So what we did is we took the science curriculum of Mars Rover and embedded all these language arts skills that are crucial for your students in this program and for their future careers in the STEM areas. So I'm going to be walking you through the curriculum this morning, and I just wanted you to be aware that inside your packet, I'm going to be referring to a lot of the documents here. I'm going to be moving at a fairly quick pace this morning because there's a lot of things you want to cover. So I'm going to walk you through these once, and as you see them, just know that they're in your packet. So if you want to refer to them as I'm talking to them, you can. The first thing you'll see is the essential question. This is kind of like a question that goes throughout. We have one for every unit that goes throughout. If you go to the next page, there is one of our little language arts mini lesson. This one is on Teacher Think Aloud, where we're actually showing kids how they can be metacognitive and think about their thinking. So that's one of the mini lessons that we have there. Going back a couple of pages, you have one of the actual lesson plans for grades 6 to 8. It'll walk you through all of the different steps. It's a complete lesson plan, so that's one you don't have to download if you're 6 to 8. Then at the end of the lesson plan, there is some of the answers. The first one is a brand new one that Elena added this past summer, which are the alignments to the new generation science standard. So that's been added and is new for this year. After that is a sample page out of the science notebook. A couple of them.
What page are you on?
I'm just flipping through in order of the book. They're not numbered, so I wish I could tell you. Okay. But it's a little past, it's the next one past those 2 pages. Is where I am. The ones that have the gray outline are from the science notebook that we put together. And there's a couple of pages there. Then there is the actual science alignment to the TEKS for the state of Texas. So if you're trying to align that to show that you're covering the standards, they are there for you. Going a couple of pages beyond that, you get into the vocabulary cards. For each unit, what we did is we selected vocabulary cards, vocabulary that we wanted the kids to, wanted you to explicitly teach. Some of them are crucial for understanding the lesson. Others are more common academic terms that the kids will see not only in science, but in reading, in math, in social studies. And we wanted to make sure that they had a solid understanding of those terms. GAR actually picked these for the first unit. Wanted to make sure that the kids knew the difference between astrology and astronomy. So you can see there's actually, it walks through it and teaches it and a lot of fun ways to do that. Now I'll be talking about these more in detail. And see if there's anything else here before I go on. And then, so that ends the first packet. In the second packet, there are some additional things from different lessons you'll see. The first, the first one is the concept maps that is covered in one of the lessons. So again, it was great that GAR put some of these together because you will not have to reproduce these when you actually teach the lessons. And then if you go beyond that, there's a second lesson that's all printed out for you, which is week 5, lesson 11. Another one of the essential questions for that unit, if you go all the way to the back of that lesson. A scoring rubric for your students. So they know exactly how their rowers will be scored. The New Generation Science alignment for that particular lesson is also included. More pages out of the science notebook for that particular lesson. The TEKS, the Texas TEKS for that. And of course, the vocabulary words for that particular unit. So you've got, out of the 15 units, you've already got 2 of them pre-printed for you. That's it, 3 of them. Oh, there's a third one in there?
We should be, yes.
Okay. So you can refer to these as I'm walking through. I'm just going to walk you through all the different components. And that way, when you see them, as you're downloading these materials, you'll know what they are. Not everything is in every particular lesson. So let me just walk you through these fairly quickly. Okay, so what we want to do with these kids is we want them to learn how real scientists work. So what we do is the kids get to see Earth and science, physics, chemistry standards through studying Mars. They also get to learn state-of-the-art internet research skills. So that was one of the things we really built into the curriculum. And depending on access you have, there are recommendations on both online and print materials. Everything is structured in the 5E inquiry-based format. And if you've got the lesson, it starts with the first E is engagement, and it walks all the way through the different steps to elaboration, which I believe is the last one. Evaluation. The lessons make extensive use of current data from NASA and images from NASA. That was one of the things that we really focused in on, resources that were right on the NASA website accessible to kids. The primary and middle school grades select a specific mission to Mars. The teams design and build their own model Mars rover. The model is a mock-up of mainly recycled materials, and which they can put a low-cost solar-powered car kit or a radio-controlled car to serve as the chassis. And that is optional. They don't have to spend the money on that. One of the nice things about the Mars rover, it's very inexpensive to operate. So it's a much, much low-cost alternative to a real robotics class at schools that don't have a budget for that. We use a very, very flexible curriculum where you can choose to use whichever modules you feel will work best in the time frame that you have available for your students. Honestly, we tried to put it together so everything flows from lesson 1 to 2 all the way to 15, So if you have the time to go and walk through the entire 6-week curriculum, I think your students will have every step they need to have a very, very successful Mars rover mission. But you can pick and choose depending on the time available. So what are the types of things that your kids will learn in the curriculum? Well, they're going to learn science process skills. They're going to get laboratory experience, a lot of information on how to do investigation and planning their missions, which is a hugely important part. A lot of kids will get into things without actually planning what they're trying to achieve. They will do their own data collection. They will be drawing inferences from that. They'll learn how to organize their work, how to report it, how to write it, and they will learn how to work together with other students. One of the things that I really thought was really attracted me to this project was the fact that it is a very, very unique collaboration between science and language arts. In most schools, we have these rigid lines between reading a language arts time and science time. What this shows kids is that all of these skills they're learning in their separate lessons all flow together in the real world. And you can't do science without a good language reading art program. And if you're good at language and reading arts, but not good at science, you're still going to be very, very limited in your career choices. The whole idea is to help kids, motivate them, and get them interested and excited about STEM careers, which is really the future of our country. So the science component walks through the student the steps necessary to create a successful Mars rover mission. The literacy component teaches key vocabulary and provides mini lessons on research, writing, and presentation skills that are crucial for student success. The program is 6 weeks long, and it walks students through the process of actually creating a Mars mission. In week 1, what the kids are doing is they are learning background knowledge about the solar system. It focuses in on the relative size of the planets, the huge distances between the planets. By week 2, with that background knowledge, they're now more specifically learning about the planet Mars. With that, developing the background knowledge they will need in order to come up with a mission on their own. In week 3, they are beginning to they take that background knowledge and they design their own unique mission for Mars. In the 4th week, they begin to learn about the actual rover that they're going to be sending down on the planet Mars. What it needs to contain, what are the components that it needs, the key pieces, how is it going to move around the planet, all those things that are crucial decisions that real NASA engineers have to make. By week 5, they're actually constructing their Mars rover and writing up their skit or their presentation for the project. And then they would, in the final week, they're practicing and presenting their program. Are there any questions on anything I've covered so far? Yes, ma'am.
Will we be able to get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Carl?
It's on the web, and we're also going to post all the materials from both last Saturday and this Saturday on Dropbox. And Laura is going to send you an email with a link to the Dropbox.
So the public can. Great, thank you.
Okay.
That's a long version of yes.
But a very complete answer. So where do you get all these materials that I've just been walking you through? Well, they're up on the Mars Rover website. If you go to marsrover.org, everything you need is right here. It's actually on the homepage below the screen, but if you click on the lesson plan button that's right here, it'll actually take you down to the section where the materials start. When you get there, and this is slightly changed from what you're seeing here, we've added a few new materials this summer, but there are some general files that apply to overall the entire lessons as a whole, all 15 of them. And then what we have are the specific information for grades 3 to 5 on one side and grades 6 to 8 on the other side. Each lesson is embedded in its own file there. And as you go to that, it comes in a zip file. And inside each of the zip files, you will have the entire lesson plan. You will have a science notebook for that particular unit. You will have the vocabulary cards for that particular unit. If there is a literacy mini lesson to go through, you will actually have that information. And then there will be a single sheet with the essential question that can be printed out. So when you click on that, you will get the option to either open the file or save it. I would recommend you save it onto your hard drive. And then you will actually be able to upload onto the screen any of the materials you have or print them out as you feel necessary. Once you do that, you will get the lesson. And if you open that folder, all of the different documents are there all in one place. So that was one change we made over 2 years ago, where we actually had to click on a lot of different links to access all the materials. Everything together in one file makes it real easy to download. So let's take a look more specifically at the lesson plans. And if you want to follow along, this is, I believe, it's very similar to the first lesson plan that you have in there. Every lesson plan starts with the week and the lesson number at the very top. At the bottom, it also has the grade, so you know if you've downloaded the right item. I believe that one last weekend was in the wrong folder. Did that get corrected, Laura? Remember somebody mentioned to you that lesson 9 was in lessons 4 place or something like that?
Oh, right, yes, we need to.
Okay, so that has not yet been corrected. So know that we're aware that in, I believe one of the lessons is in the wrong folder, but we're gonna get those updated. Okay, so you can check when you download to make sure it's the file that you were looking for. Then what happens is you look at the very top, everything is very well organized for you. What we do is we have the grade level here and the amount of time we expect this to take. Now keep in mind when Elena and I designed these lessons, we tried to get them to fit into 45-minute segments. If the amount of time you have is different from 45 minutes, you may need to either fill in some additional time if you have more, or you may need to trim some of the time that you spend on the different activities that are available. But know that it was based on a 45-minute lesson segment. Then what you also have is the vocabulary that we will be covering on the cards here. So if you already know that your kids know the word calculate, you know that you probably don't need to cover that particular card, but you can preview them here and decide which ones you feel are crucial for your students to cover. Then there is one of the nice things is we included a material list that includes everything that you will need. Whoop, sorry, I thought that was going to pop up there. Everything that you will need in order to complete the lesson here. So you can pull that down and get your materials together before the lesson. The next thing you will have is the essential question. The essential question for the unit, we've tried to spend a lot of time with these, and they're different between grades 3 to 5 sometimes and grades 6 to 8. What we thought was we wanted the kids to have a focus so that when the lesson began, there would be a question that they know they were going to be held accountable to answer, and one that would carry, if not the entire lesson, before they could fully answer it. That way, that would be a hint that they need to be paying attention because they know you're going to come back. And for the first lesson was how much you describe the solar system to a friend who knows nothing about the relative sizes of the sun and planets and the distances between them. And you can see the complexity of that question will force them to pay attention throughout the entire lesson.
I have a question.
Sure.
All of these lessons are geared to the 6th and 8th grade students?
No, ma'am.
No, in the packet?
In the packet they may be. I'm not sure what was printed in the packet.
Okay.
Okay.
We have, I think I told Laura to do all 6A, but we have separately written 3.5 and 6A. They've been separately reviewed by separate referees, which has been a pain. And they are, Mrs. Slagle is herself a 4th grade teacher. So if anything is wrong, what you're going to find is maybe the middle school level isn't ambitious enough. But the grade schools are well aligned. Because Elena went along channeling herself, teaching.
Mm-hmm. We went through great pains to differentiate between the 3 to 5 and grade 6 days curriculum and make differences there. A lot of times the materials are the same, the reference materials and all that we use are the same, but they're talked about in different ways and more of the children. Even in some cases, some of the vocabulary cards use the same card but have different ways of explaining depth of knowledge. We did, one of them was variable, and in grades 3 to 5, we just talked about variable. But in grade 6 to 8, we talk about independent and dependent variables. So we go into, we really made a point to differentiate between the 2 grades.
So since they're not in our pack, we just get them.
You just get them off online. Yes, exactly right. The lesson objectives. allow you to document what skills are being covered and taught in each lesson if you need to for your administrator. Okay, you can see these here, what we're trying to do in that first lesson. The objectives are very, very similar for both grades in this case. The engagement section is the first of the 5 E's. This sets up the stage for learning by piquing student interest. Students in this stage learn key vocabulary, crucial background knowledge through the use of engaging and interactive activities. So in this one, what they're doing is you present the vocabulary for the unit first. Then the teacher is recommended to go in an open space and using the index card to 9 students who represent the planets and the sun. Other students place them in order, so the students are actually standing and moving around the classroom, being placed in order and working outward. As students correctly identify the position, ask students what they know about each of the planets. Once students know, ask them if they can identify how planets travel on the sun, they rotate and revolve, and then the students practice that. So this is for the grade, this one's actually for 3 to 5, okay? The engagement process tries to get kids really excited and really involved. So I've got a couple of pictures here of what it might look like when kids are actually representing different planets and revolving and rotating in the classroom. The second one is the exploration unit. What this helps students to do is they learn through critical information through hands-on active learning, not by just sitting in their seat and absorbing information that's being provided. Okay, so here it tells that the students, I'm reading it only because it's so small, the type up there. Students are divided into teams of 4 and 5 and will assign a bead to represent each planet and record the data in the system. By tying the sun bead to the end of 5 meters of yarn, the students will use the table in a science notebook to measure out the distances each planet is from the sun. So what this is actually helping the students see is the relative distance between the planets and the sun. The explanation is the third E in the lesson plan. It allows students to synthesize and integrate the learning they did in the first 2 sections. You are able to monitor and reteach students to ensure that they all understand the crucial learning that they were supposed to get in the first 2 parts. We have the science notebook comes into play in this section of the lesson plan. In the elaboration section, the 4th of the E's, we offer suggestions on how you can differentiate instruction depending on the group ability level you have. So if you're working with a GT group or some kids that may need a little bit more remediation. It also will suggest other activities that you can do if you have some extra time left in your lesson. The evaluation section gives you some suggestions on how you can assess student progress if you need to obtain grades for their work that they've completed during this. So if this is actually part of your science curriculum and you need to take grades, you'll have suggestions in this section on how to do that. At the end of the lesson plan, you will also find a large number of supplemental resources. These are almost invariably links to websites that were working this past summer when we put the curriculum together. I can't say that as of this morning that all of them are working, but we tried our best. We tested each one of those. We test them every summer to make sure they're still active. But for the most part, since many of these are NASA resources, they are pretty stable and available for you to use. So one of the things we strongly recommend when you're using the lesson plans is that you preview each of your lesson plan components that involve using your classroom computer to make sure that all video links that you want to use are working, that the mini PowerPoint lesson will actually play on your computer, and if you're using one of the interactive programs, that you have all the things downloaded that you need. In some cases, I know that if you're using a classroom computer, you may not have administrator access, so you may need to involve your campus IT person to get you to install whatever it is that you need to play. So before each of those lessons, check to see what computer things you need and make sure that all will work on your particular computer. All right, let's talk about the materials, and this is where you actually can follow along with me as I'm going through the materials that are in the packet that you have there. The first thing you have, and I think it's actually a couple of pages back, is the New Generation Science Standards. What we've tried to do is we've included the SEPs, which are the Science and Engineering Practices, the Discipline Core Ideas, the DCI, and the Cross-Cutting Concept, the CCCs, that are in each of the lessons. That was done for every single lesson to show how Mars rover maps onto the New Generation Science Standards. They are also aligned with each one of the 5 sections of the lesson, so you know which ones are being covered where. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
One thing that the people who at NSTA and in the NGSS have written and developed it, the experts all say that one of the keys is you have to show the scaffolding. So when you are teaching a cross-cutting core concept or a discipline core idea, you have to tell them. And if you're teaching particularly they're concerned with, okay, now we're going to teach a science and engineering practice, which is a tool or a tool kit that cuts across a lot of science and engineering in each case. And the curriculum is based in part on the idea that if you explicitly tell them they're learning a technique that can be applied to other subjects, each time you teach it, that they might actually get that. So there is this idea that, and I know I very seldom used to do that, and I never saw that happen when I was in high school. My high school physics teacher never once said, now we're teaching you a science practice. Even though he didn't show the skeleton. And that's something that's really different about the NGSS, is they want you to show the skeleton, which is why the table that Ken just showed is there.
Let me go back to that then for a second. What it really does is it takes away the mystery in science. It's kind of like removing that veil so kids can actually see that these are actually strategies that scientists use. Okay? Thank you for clarifying that, Gar. The first thing, I've already mentioned this a little bit, is the essential question. We have these available on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper as PDF files. So you simply print these out and post these. And we strongly recommend that these be posted because what it does is it focuses student attention throughout the lesson. There's a separate one for each grade level, so one for 3 to 5, one for 6 to 8 for each of the 15 lessons. And by posting it, it serves as a visible reminder for students about what they were expected to learn during the lesson. The vocabulary cards, I'm going to go into a little bit more depth now. So when we were putting these together, what we did is we used the best practices on how to teach vocabulary, research-based methods for teaching vocabulary. We carefully chose illustrations that would clarify the word meaning and form part of the explanation of the word. And a lot of the text on the back side of the cards actually uses the illustration to show the meaning. We put in student-friendly definitions. There's absolutely nothing worse than defining a word with other words that kids don't understand. So we were to put surface, the outside part or top layer of something. That's something simple that all kids can understand. On the flip side of the cards, new vocabulary is taught using scientific proven methods. So the first thing we did, providing that student-friendly definition, which is restated on the back so you don't have to flip the card over in order to go over that with the kids. We provide examples and non-examples of using the word. We have multiple exposures to the word so they get to hear it. Research shows that kids have to hear a word in context between 12 and 15 times for it to become part of their working vocabulary. Wherever possible, word origins and cognates are taught. So how many of you work with kids who may speak another language at home, perhaps Spanish? Some of you do. If you do, you will notice throughout wherever a word lent itself to an equivalent in a Latin-based language such as Spanish, we point that out because that may be a part of their working vocabulary in their first language. We also ask kids to actively think about the word in real context. So we'll get them a situation and tell them, if I'm using the word correctly, give me thumbs up. If I'm not, give me thumbs down. And then finally, we ask them to use the word themselves in some sort of a real world setting. So they're actually, that word is becoming part of their own working vocabulary. So we do that with every one of the words. We also have included a series of literacy mini lessons. These include, and this is not the complete list, but these are some of them. Internal dialogues, in other words, metacognition, thinking about your thinking. Informational text features, how to do research online and using print features. How to take notes. I mean, did anyone here ever explicitly learn how to take notes, or is that something we just kind of picked up on our own? This teaches how to take notes, how to write a scientific question, how to make inferences and predictions, how to learn new vocabulary on your own. Because we can only cover a handful of words per lesson, but when they're doing their research, there are going to be dozens and dozens of words that they may not be familiar with that are crucial for their understanding. Making concept maps, writing effective captions and labels, and finally, how to write their presentation for the Mars Rover celebration. So these are all embedded in different lessons. Here are a couple of sample pages from the mini lesson on finding information in nonfiction text. So when they're actually doing the research, before they begin, you would walk them through this. It talks about search processes, useful text features. So like before you start doing research, you want to know what you're looking for. What's your purpose? You want to be able to find keywords that you can find in the text to focus your research. Finding key locations in the text, where to look for those keywords, and then how to scan text. It also talks about using the different print features and organizational aids and illustrations that are in all types of nonfiction text. It differentiates between print and online features. So like tables of contents are in books, but navigation bars are online. So it walks through all features. Some of them are in both, so there's only a single one. Or like the search and find, you can only do online. So it talks about both types of search features. And then finally, there's a lot of illustrations using the actual NASA website that show how kids can conduct research online. One of the things we did as well is we included a teacher, what we call a teacher guide for this. And in the teacher guide, each one of the slides is reproduced small, along with suggested language that you can use to go over that slide with your students. Okay? This actually is saved as a PDF in this form, so you can actually print this out and have that along to go along with the lesson as you do that. So it will tell you when there's clicks of animation on there. So if something will happen on the slide before you advance to the next slide, it will tell you that, and it will actually tell you where we recommend you click as you're going through the narrative on the slide. Obviously, these don't have to be read verbatim, but there's just suggested language of what we were trying to get across with the particular slide. Any questions? And I forgot to look at my own notes here that said there was a click there. The science notebooks contain the written questions and activities related to each question. So we've got our engagement questions here. We've got the exploration activities here. And what's really nice about these, they allow for alternative assessment. So it's not just a multiple choice quiz or something like that. We offer lots of different ways for you to assess how well your students are learning the content. We also include room at the end of every lesson for students to answer that essential question. So you can evaluate how well the students understood the overriding question for that particular unit. Okay, any questions on the lesson plans themselves? Let me quickly go through them with you, the additional materials that are in the common files, the ones that are there for all the lessons. The common file materials, if you remember back on that web page I showed you at the very top, above the lesson plans are all of the general files. One of the things that are included is an overview of all the topics that are covered in Mars Rover. They're organized by unit, and then each of the individual lessons are listed by name. So that if you know you're not going to have time to cover all 15, you can, with this document, decide which of those lessons are the most crucial to cover. We also have included a pacing guide that can help you stay on track as you're going through the curriculum. The pacing guide makes recommendations about how many days each of the lessons are expected to take and how much time to spend on each of the individual components. Now, of course, you can adjust that up or down depending on the needs of your particular class, but at least it gives you kind of what we think it would have taken you when you went through. So let me show you what that looks like. The first thing you'll notice is that each of the weeks is in a color band going down the left-hand side. You will notice that lesson 3 has 2 color bands. That's because we expect that to be like the last day of week 1 and the first day of the second week. Beyond that, you have the amount of length we expect each of these different units to take. And remember, it's based on a 45-minute lesson plan. Within that, we tell you how long we expected each of the different 5 E components to take you to go through with your students. And you'll notice that in the elaboration and the evaluation, that is always left up to you as needed. So we don't add that into the time there for you. The essential question is restated along with the key vocabulary so that you have a convenient place for all that is in one place. And then finally, you will see some additional activities that you can implement if you have additional time. We have added this year pre-assessment and post-assessments for the entire unit. So if you would like, what you can do is you can, it's a single open-ended question test that's 15 questions long. It's the same test at the pre and post, so you can see what your kids have actually learned once they've completed the curriculum. Okay, we talked about that. We've
Can I
talked.
speak to that?
Sure.
This may seem like we're really getting into being hyper-professional in a way that you seldom ever see. I mean, the number of people who ever give pre and post tests and compare it is pretty small. I don't recall being treated that way by a teacher ever. But then, you know, I was taught in Latin in the last century. I'm not actually kidding. I graduated from high school 1 year after Latin ceased to be a legal language for higher education and instruction in this country. But the reason we put the pre and post assessment in is that we are doing research on the efficacy of these materials funded by NASA. And you will be getting all sorts of email from Ken and his cohort in crime, Colleen, about please fill in your permission slip and please help us get the permission through your upper administration and all those things. And in the end, please get your parents to send in permission slips for their kids. Getting that done is time consuming and challenging, and we will not have it done before you start this curriculum. When I talked to the NASA evaluation people, Hillary and Danielle, at some length about this about a year ago, and they told me, look, here's the trick. You give your pre-assessment as homework. And I said, that's legal? And they said, no, we don't require institutional review of homework yet. And bite your tongue, don't say it aloud amongst the wrong people. That's a vision of horror, having to put your homework through safety review. So we're going to ask you to save this stuff and then communicate with us about it once you have signed permission from the parents and your school has bought it. And we really urge you to do that because it really is important to our ability to keep this program funded, to be able to demonstrate it's effective. And so some of you may have already started. I just got these uploaded last week. So please use the pre-assessments and the post-assessments, and then we will send you instructions about how to get that material to us.
Yeah, hang on to that, because if we have that information, we can certainly demonstrate for NASA that this curriculum helps kids to learn and to become excited about science and math.
And of course, for your own good, you can demonstrate to your principal and other people that, hey, I actually taught them something.
And that is so definitely helpful. One of the things that Elena also added this summer was a science notebook rubric. So what you can do is do this either by unit or you can do it over the entire 6-week program. And it tells you what an outstanding science notebook looks like, a pretty good one, meeting expectations, and then those that are not quite on par. So it's an easy way to grade the science notebooks. Another thing we've included is science-friendly glossary. This includes all of the vocabulary words through all 15 units, so that if you want your students to have this quick reference guide, and of course printing out all those sheets for every child would be very excessive. This has all the words on a simple 3 to 4 page document where they can review with the same student-friendly definitions. Okay, you get a couple of examples here. You will notice that the bold words are the ones that are covered in the curriculum and taught explicitly. The non-bolded words are additional words that we felt we didn't have room to cover in the curriculum, but we felt that a lot of students perhaps might need those. Maybe not as many as the ones we chose for the unit, but there's some additional words in there. Yes, ma'am.
And all these are in PDF files?
That's
that are
correct.
easily
Yeah.
accessible.
In the common, the ones I'm showing you now are what we call common files. They're above the lesson plans, and they're downloadable as PDFs. Great question. We also have a teacher glossary, because certainly there will be terms as you go through all the research material that your kids will run across that you might not know the meaning of off the top of your head, but allows you to go through many of the different words that your students are likely to encounter. So if you know what an astronomical unit is, or an elliptical plane, so those words are provided for you. We also have strand map resources for you. The strand maps are a tool for finding NASA resources to replace specific science that relate to science and math concepts. The strands illustrate connections between concepts, as well as how concepts build upon one another across grade levels. The supplemental links below are relevant to the concepts, so we have them for each lesson there. Additional resource for you. Formative assessments have been added this year, quite a bit. We added examples of 15 different types of formative assessments that can be used in order to evaluate student learnings in lieu of traditional worksheets with multiple choice questions. This one is called 3-2-1s. This one is write 3 things you learned, 2 things I find interesting, and 1 question I have. And you can actually cut those out and they can be like an exit ticket for the lessons. And there's 15 different ones, so you can use a variety throughout as you go through the curriculum. Exit tickets in cases are explicitly sent as that. This one is particular. How do you know that the sun is bigger than Jupiter and that the solar system is bigger than both of them? A great question for children to be able to explain that in clear, understandable language. One of the cool things we decided to add is what we call mission patches. There is 6 different units in the lesson. We have 1 patch for each one of those units, which are 3 lessons, 2.5 lessons each. What we thought might be cool for the kids, particularly the younger kids, we were thinking 3 to 5 with these, is that you could actually have a sash or something that they could wear, and as they complete the units, they could add those on. They could put them on their notebooks or whatever. And they're set up in a way where you can actually print these on Avery 6-to-a-page stickers so that they will actually peel and stick onto that if you so choose. So this was kind of a nice way of saying you have successfully completed Unit 1, you're well on your way, and it shows them making progress across. The formative assessment strategies are here. Well, I was telling you, I showed you the 3-2-1. Here's a list of all 15 of them, and each one of them comes with an illustration of a template that you can use to teach those. A couple of different ideas that you can see there. Exit tickets, extra, extra, and mud pie, which is kind of an interesting one. It says, on an index card, students write 1 concept about the lesson that confuses them. So that gives you right there what you need to reteach. One of the other things that we included with you is how to download Google Earth Mars onto your computer. Okay? Step-by-step instruction. And I understand that in most cases, you'll be handing this to your IT person on campus.
There's one thing I need to clarify. Google has a product, Google Mars. It also has a product, Google Earth, which has inside it Mars. We're talking about the latter. Plain Google Mars has one glaring deficiency. As you move your cursor around the surface of Mars, you don't get the latitude and longitude read out. Inside Google Earth, you do. No idea why. It makes no sense to me. But the kids will need to know the latitude and longitude of where they're exploring. So that's why we insist that you pick that tool as opposed to just plain Google Mars.
So we do have a couple of recommendations before you get started on that. I had a lot of difficulty at my building at U of H downloading some of the materials that Elena had at first. I had to go get my IT person and have them download the latest versions of Flash and Java and Shockwave in order that everything would play properly on my computer. Okay? Download Google Earth Mars, the software to run the Gale Crater and Interactive, I don't remember which lesson that's in, and Microsoft Silverlight 4, and it's required for the Worldwide Telescope, which is in one of the lessons. So what you want to make sure is that before you even begin your lessons, the lessons, that you download these things. They will be truly helpful and will prevent you being in the middle of a lesson and something not playing for you that you wanted to cover. Are there any questions on anything I've covered this morning? I will go back, yes, definitely.
We're a one-to-one school, so this is something that all the students could download on their computers.
I don't see why not. These are all educational tools, so there would be nothing.
No charge for any of them.
No, these are all free as far as I know, every one of these particular items. That was one of the things that we really worked very hard at, that all the materials were accessible to everybody, that they did not have a cost. If there is anything that has a cost and it's nominal, it's mentioned in the notes, but we have an alternative that is free. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if there are no questions, I thank you for your time this morning. It was great to be with you. And I do have one other thing to do. One of the things that I work on, as well as the language and reading arts, is the evaluation of the Mars Rover program for NASA. And one of the things we are very interested in is getting the feedback from the teachers who participated last year in Mars Rover. Is there anyone who did participate last year in Mars Rover? Did you guys fill out the online survey that Colleen sent out to you? You did, all three of you did? Then I guess I don't need that. You followed the links all the way through and got your...
I honestly don't remember.
Can you tell me your name?
Kathy Buchanan, Q-U-E-S.
Yes, you did complete it. Okay, so you're good. Okay?
DC Mendez?
Yes, DC Mendez, yes. Kathy, I'm sorry. Don't have yours done, Kathy. Did you want to complete a paper copy so that you're eligible for the drawing?
Oh, no, we're not running out of time.
Last name again, is
Heyman, H-A-Y.
did you do it this past week, by any chance?
No, I probably did it.
Yeah, I
did it today.
That may have been. Would you like to get credit for it and do it?
I can.
Sure, I'd love to. We would love to have your feedback, and we need it. We do need the teacher feedback. We use that for a presentation to do at AGU. We also report this information back to NASA at the compiled level. Okay, so I'll hang out for a few minutes while you do that. Anyone else who participated last year? All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning.
Okay, this is a good place to break. I want to introduce, before we do, the woman who will be presenting for the next, or helping me present for the next bit. Lenina Berry from Johnston Middle School has taught this program and is also named last year as one of the AIAA Teacher of the Year Achievement Awards. We've got 3 in this area for the last several years. Molly Garay from the Red School and Joan LeBay Marquez from Bernie ISD. And it's really an honor to get to work with these ladies because they're all awesome. So I'm going to let Lenina do most of the presenting after what we're about to do, which is a well-known activity called coffee break.
Yes.
No, I really would like your help. That's why I asked you to come. But what we're doing,
Ready to present then.
what we're doing next is this activity. They get to dissect this toxic substance
Oh, okay, yeah.
and draw it and draw conclusions from it and all that.
Okay.
This is from week 1, lesson 2, and so I can present it and you can chime in with comments about how it works. The and I actually
I didn't get to go through this whole thing last year. I got pulled out to teach reading intervention.
Oh, okay.
I didn't go through the whole program.
Let's
I do
see.
remember the activity.
I need to bring up Brain Pop.
And the thing is, like, oh, and I don't know if it's because it's her first time. It's a little hard. She said,
I think I made a mistake here in the broadcast. I need to share this screen. Doing live plus broadcast, you tend to forget steps. Sorry about that. We will have the screen up for the rest of it.
Two, how you guys like that pocket town? I said you can make talking boards. Or whatever, you choose to talk to somebody, talk to it, and it says something. Yeah, I marked it in that, and I told them, this is, you ever wanted to see something with that, this is really, you put all into the body. I'm a very inspirational.
Yeah, you are. That's,
Especially when.
that'll hook me.
Yeah, so, and that's what it was. And then we were getting. So. That only enhances the program. Because on the turtle art,
So we'll restart in about 6 minutes.
I'm going to scratch. Not the scratch, because I just wrote, I'm going to do
What is it?
What is that? My boss got me a sub, so, you know. Yeah, I'm just trying to get you up.
They want me coordinator of elementary science asked me to do test assessments, and I was like, okay, this one, this, everything after.
See, you got a lot rougher than me, rough person than me. I only got 2, but.
And I'm the vice president of our HO, so I'm like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, there's a point where you have to say that. Yeah. And so I pretty much stood my ground and said, that's it. I'm not thinking on any more responsibility.
writing black by themselves, that's pretty major too. So they need to review this one.
Yeah. Spread the buck. There's other teachers.
There you go.
Utilize their leadership skills.
There you go.
What year did you graduate?
Actually, 2003.
2003. I was just simply before.
My wife was 2002.
Okay, 1982.
But it's really, really good to have this connection because like, when I was talking to her, 16, And I just told them that, you know, hey, there's an entrance fee to get to these competitions. It's $60. Last year was 10. Which makes sense. I mean, they get an A&M shirt. And now they get a much better. We have to pay more. I brought 24 kids, and I told them that, you know, we're not a ton of school, and those who qualify for tests. Pretty much.
That's like my campus.
And so, you know, the fact that I'm an alumni, I asked them to help price size.
Well, that's good.
The minute you walk in the door, you're not ready.
On 4 events out of 5 teams I had. So it's like, so they actually spent exactly talking to
Relax, have a muffin, yes.
help us. We actually was.
Okay. Yeah. My son reads. Oh, I see. I give him a hard time.
No, actually, for you want
Yeah, you know, that's always
Okay. So we're going to tag team this one. I realize I make a mistake I make often.
Hey, Dr. B.
Yeah.
So you know Lenina doesn't really want to present, right? You know Lenina doesn't really want to present, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was fresh.
I'm going to ask our guests to comment as we go along here. Now, we're going to start doing activities. I realize that I have to model interactive learning in order to teach you to do it. So we will do that. Now, the first part, this is week 1, lesson 2. And in a fit of insanity a year ago, I taught this lesson personally myself to 100 private school students simultaneously, 7th and 8th graders in San Diego. I had to work up to this. My warm-up was to take 28 rising 8th graders to Europe, hiking. The good news there is most of you know this, but you don't really believe it. Most of these kids act out mostly because they're bored. They weren't bored, so they were all wonderful, my 8th graders in Europe. Now, the 100 kids all at once in San Diego was a bit more challenging. So I have taught this lesson. Now, the first step is actually to now, why do I not have sound? Oh, okay.
That's not Mars. It's. Wait a second. You want me to say that other planet? Dear Tim and Moby, is there life on Mars? From Conrad. Yeah, a lot of you have been asking if Moby's a Martian. He isn't. Actually, he's from. Moving on. The short answer is we don't know if there's any life on Mars. There's definitely no intelligent life. You know, that kind of can build cities and stuff. But Mars has enough in common with Earth that there might be simpler forms of life there. Well, they're more alike than you might think. Mars is the 4th planet from the Sun, the next closest after us. It has a similar tilt, which gives it 4 seasons. And it's terrestrial, which means it's made of rocks and minerals. If you landed on the Martian surface, you'd notice many of the same natural features we have here on Earth. There are canyons and mountains, and its poles have ice caps, just like ours. Yep, you can see Mars without a telescope. That's why people have been wondering about it since ancient times. Its reddish color led the ancient Romans to name it after their god of war. And as recently as the early 1900s, some astronomers were certain there was intelligent life up there. They interpreted some lines on the planet's surface as a network of canals. These could only have been created by an advanced society. Nope, they were completely wrong. The canals turned out to be an optical illusion caused by their telescope lenses. As technology improved, astronomers were able to learn a lot more about Mars. Orbiters and landers have been gathering data about the planet since the 1970s. Starting in the 1990s, NASA has sent a series of remote-controlled rovers to explore the surface. So in the last 40 years, there's been a flood of new information about Mars climate and geology. Well, like we now know that Mars is red because its surface is covered in iron oxide, better known as rust. And we've learned about Mars' massive dust storms, which can cover the entire planet. So far, no mission has uncovered any evidence of life, but NASA did find some hints that life may have existed long ago. The most important clue is the substance that all life depends on. No, water. Most scientists believe that a planet needs liquid water to support life. Only liquid water can deliver nutrients to living cells and dissolve waste. Mars has a very thin atmosphere, so it doesn't trap heat like ours does. The average surface temperature is way below zero. So all that water at its north pole and below its surface is frozen. And the air is mostly carbon dioxide, so it would be impossible for creatures like us to breathe. Right, plants and other organisms can breathe carbon dioxide. And here on Earth, there are microorganisms that thrive in the cold with little or no oxygen. So it's possible that Mars might support more basic forms of life. Plus, there's plenty of evidence that long ago, water flowed freely on the Martian surface. There are riverbeds and other landforms that seemed like they were carved by flowing water. If that's true, there's a good chance that Mars once supported life. Since it's more than 4 billion years old, it's kind of difficult to say when. No, silly, those are Mars moons, Phobos and Deimos. Martian battle destroyers? They're tiny chunks of barren rock. Did you even listen to a word I said?
You know, they've updated this.
Yeah, I was just when we started showing, we've shown this training several times, and it's
This is not familiar.
very new. Yeah.
There has been one advancement that they haven't updated. It's the Maven that went up last Sunday to study the atmosphere. So they believe that Mars used to have
If I fall asleep, it's partly because we had 2 MOIs, Mars Orbit Insertions, this week. We had Maven on Sunday evening, and Mongolian, or Mom, as it's easier to pronounce, it was Wednesday. Yeah.
That landed, right?
No, that was an orbiter.
Oh, it's an orbiter also?
Right, we had two new orbiters. There are now 6 working spacecraft on or around Mars. The Twitterverse is really kind of going wild. And you should be able to use, one of the reasons I'm a little surprised we have such a small crowd this year in these 2 workshops, we will talk to that later, I'm going to ask you guys some advice, is we thought that with Maven and Mom arriving right now, there'd be much more interest in Mars, and you certainly can use that to build excitement. I mean, the whole point of this exercise is to get kids much more excited about science, technology, engineering, and math. My view is if you're a scientist or an engineer and you aren't having the best time ever all the time, you're doing it wrong. Science is supposed to be fabulous, good fun. And if it isn't, you're doing it wrong. Now, of course, 13 hours in a C-130 Hercules flying to Antarctica, it's hard to hang on to that concept. But, you know, there's exceptions to every rule. That concept came rushing back the moment that plane touched down, let me tell you. So what we're going to do in this lesson, first off, you start with the vocabulary cards, and then and the difference between astronomy and astrology is one of them, or a pair of them. We're going to, the activity we're about to do is the second activity. Record detailed observations of a simulated surface and simulated interior of Mars. So now, in order to give the kids a background to start this activity, you either show brain pop, and this isn't necessarily an or, you can show them brain pop and ask them to read the What is Mars handout. Maybe have them read that as a preparatory homework before you actually teach this lesson. And that handout is in the zip file. But now we're going to give you should have on your table a straw, a plastic knife, a paper plate, and I would ask my loyal staff to help here. Now, you're all veteran teachers, so you know perfectly well that this particular toxic substance I am handing out should not be handed out in advance because it won't last long enough to actually conduct the lesson. And please stress as you hand it out that this is an unknown toxic substance. Now, I'm aware that this is Texas. Title 7, paragraph B of the Texas Nutrition Code does allow the use of these toxic substances if you get permission from your school nutritionist. You can use somewhat off the wall. They prefer that you use approved snack items for this purpose. Candy bars aren't anymore. It's actually hard because you need something that's layered and soft. All right, this is Texas. Tamales. Now, my favorite choice is cucumber sandwiches because no one can accuse you of serving the kids food. They won't eat. And yet cucumber sandwiches are right there on the approved nutrition list. So you have to be a little more creative than just handing out. I mean, the reason for using these is when you ask the question, how do you know this is from Mars? You'll get the snarky answer. It says so. So your job now is to, and we'll all circulate and look over your shoulder, look carefully at this unknown foreign object. And besides taking note of its color, texture, measure it. Do we have rulers out there, Laura?
We all have rulers in there.
Okay, measure the dimensions. If you're a middle school class, you may want them to compute the area and volume. After you've recorded your observations, and by recording your observations, one of the things that was neat about actually teaching this lesson to an actual 7th and 8th grade class was, what did the kids do when asked to record? A lot of them did very good drawings. So you can encourage your kids to actually draw their toxic substance. In their
Is this with the wrapper or without the wrapper?
Without the wrapper. They are allowed to, now of course, if you want to really simulate good laboratory practice, you can have them all put gloves on. And that depends. If you do have teaching good laboratory practice as an objective, you might want to do that. Have them put gloves on, wear their lab goggles and all that. Because if this was a Mars substance, you would actually have goggles, a mask, and gloves on.
Well, can I jump in with two things before you guys get started? First thing is in your packet, in the folders that you guys got, there's a packet that starts with this essential question for lesson 2. If you dig into that packet about halfway, there's an example of one of the student reproducibles that go with this activity. And so as you're going through this, you may want to review those. I know Ken took you through some of this stuff earlier, but just as a
yeah, you actually have the science notebook for this activity.
And then the second thing I wanted to mention, and this kind of goes to what Gar was saying about the using gloves and how you would actually go about manipulating this. One of the extensions of this that I think it's kind of it's not, I don't know if it's explicitly written into this version of this or not. Something that we talked about at some of these sessions in the past is the idea of putting your kids in the mindset that all of this exploration is happening through a remote rover process, right? So you're not actually handling it. You're telling a rover that's right on a planet that's pretty far away to do this, and it's all done with commands, right? And so one of the things, and you can try a little bit of this out now, or you can just imagine what this would be like, but especially for older, maybe middle school students or even upper elementary students, pairing the kids up and having one person do the commands and the other person do the manipulations, and even doing that in a coded way where it's like, okay, move this, then move this, and you have to get the commands right in order to manipulate the thing. It takes a little longer, but it gives them this idea of what, and for all of the lessons that we're going to go through today, I want you to remember that this is a framework, right? And building in extensions like that is part of the process.
One of the things we also put in the written version, but I'm not going to have you do because I work, but when you're in a laboratory classroom with a tile floor and proper lab benches with sinks and all that good stuff, you can actually have them put their sample or part of their sample in a glass of water and see what happens. Or put your dentures in a glass of Coca-Cola and see what happens. They dissolve, by the way. So you have, let's see, what, 10 minutes at this point?
Spend enough time to go through and simulate what the kids would kind of go through.
The kids spend longer time. You give the kids maybe 20 minutes because you want them to make good drawings. And oh yeah, your core sampler, your straw. This is an area where by the time they get to middle school, gender-specific behaviors start to enter. Every guy figures immediately how to get his sample out of his core. Most of the girls sort of puzzle over it for a bit. Andrew, would you care to elaborate?
What?
How do you get your sample out of the core?
How do you get your sample out of the core? Yeah, you jab the straw.
You jab the straw in, but now you have to remove it.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I mean, you're just proving my statement.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think I know what you mean by your statement. Would you have to squeeze it out like this?
Oh, no, well, now that's innovative. I hadn't thought of that.
I see. Using pressure.
Yes, you use pressure. You blow on it. All the boys think of that immediately, and the girls are going. Now, of course,
our straws aren't clear. If you can get clear straws, that's actually the best. If it is a clear straw, then they don't have to. They can get it through the straw.
Okay, so spend about 10 minutes actually working on this activity. Now, because you're adults, I'm allowed to say, as your very last test, you can actually taste your toxic substance. As if you needed that permission. And if anybody needs more toxic substances, we have them.
This is how we can see what's inside.
There's a place that I found called Reuse Houston. That
Mhm.
would be perfect for teachers to know about when they build their rovers. It's just a huge warehouse with used building supplies. So you can get wire, you can get.
Well, when we break for debriefing, I'll let you chime in with that.
So it's all free with the tax exempt.
When you're all experienced marcher, or is it time? When did you guys come to this grade last year? Yeah. Yeah, so one thing we need to talk about, I think, is what, how to set we need to talk about here and learn more about
You discovered something.
We discovered that Mars is nuts.
Yeah, I know.
Well, you can end up with kinetic ground rules.
Actually, Snickers actually. See, now you take other samples, so if you were in a different location. Take a different sample.
I mean, they think that they have to do this.
Now, wonder if it's the same thing, but do not use this.
That's 2.2.
See how important it is to
I was like,
Yeah, you were thinking it would be just this. Yeah.
Right, but you're talking about if they see it and they just see that.
And it's just made me think about the rovers that are out there.
Yeah, but people aren't really down. If you're you're not going to drill down. Yeah. No, I think it's that. You saw it.
Yeah, it's got
distorted.
Well, I screwed up in the morning. I didn't press share screen until a few minutes ago.
Oh, and it's also.
I'm sure it has all those.
So everybody here's Ken talking, but doesn't see the slides. But the slides are available.
Small.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, curiosity is the size of the small.
Yeah, I was dealing with
Right, so I'm saying, if you never know of it, watch.
And push it back.
Alright, yes, that would be better.
So I expect my phone would have worked. Hey, share the screen.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing is, if we have an old, the content is this.
But then look at that, interior is not focusing.
This is only 2 years old.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think
So it's more liquid.
Yes.
But then there's signs in one school, because it gives the letters of the name of the company.
No, really? Damn, that's a marketing person came over to the designer and said, oh, we need to add.
I'm sorry. Brown. So it's the layers and then, so that's the brown.
This thing is wrong.
Although we would think there'd be brown.
What if you
Okay.
did it from the inside?
Let's see how bad we are here.
Yeah, as soon as I can find a once we do in our own propose, we'll propose that.
Course samples.
Yeah, that's another way to say it. This is a stubborn mark.
Never thought
Yeah, this is very.
That's a good core sample.
We found fossilized bacteria.
We have proven that it's life on Earth. Even if it wants its name in the science.
Nothing.
You always wonder about if you're actually doing field biology in some of the wilder parts of the country. You always wonder, am I going to find an absolutely new organism with my class? It happens. It still happens. There was a dentist about 8 years ago found a new muscle in the face. The muscle was always destroyed by the standard dissection. He did a non-standard dissection. He kept saying, I'm seeing a muscle when I'm doing surgery on that patient, so this is there. And actually, I guess it was actually a lot longer ago than that, because I remember hearing about it in the middle 90s. But within the last 30 years, there's a new muscle in the human body. 25 years ago, we found a new weather phenomenon. So.
Yeah. I was sharing with my kids about the little dust storms that you talked to. They showed us. That's about the lightning. They're completely like just enamored with it. They're ready. They want to do. They're like ready for this. We shall see, right?
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty neat. Is that video? Is that on the website where you can see the videos? Anything like that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I think walking around, I think you've all gotten through this about as far as you're going to go. Okay, so let's go through the debriefing. Anybody want to discuss how your sample is similar or different from the samples of your classmates? You see it? And one hint here is and at this time of year it's easy, buy a mixed bag of samples.
Even we did two different pieces of Snickers. And with one of them, when we cut it in half, we could see the peanuts, and our core samples totally missed them.
So
Even that was different.
so you have differences within a single Snicker. That's true. So Snickers are a good sample because they are heterogeneous, and you can have pieces that have nuts in them and pieces that don't. Now, actually, if we had really handed out multiple samples and you'd gotten a Kit Kat, well, you couldn't actually cut that with a plastic knife. So what data, somebody from this table, what data do you have that's from the reading of the video that supports that this sample may have come from Mars? This table over here.
Repeat the question.
Second question up here. I probably ought to get my laser pointer out.
Volcanoes. They had canyons and volcanoes and craters.
The snarky smartass answer is it says on the box. But actually, this is a very difficult question because
we didn't read the selection, but the video, you talking about the brain pop video?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. From
I don't think.
So, well, that's an answer. You don't think that any of the data in the video or the reading selection support that your sample may have come from Mars. What data do you have from the reading selection of the video that may support this sample has come from elsewhere? Okay. Well, it's edible. There's actually a simpler answer. What does the, we ought to give out some stale ones. That would, what is characteristic of a fresh sample of candy that really means it can't come from Mars besides the fact that it's edible? It's moist. It's moist. And that's a tough one to come up with.
Well, I think it brings, reading these things brings to like this thing about what, okay, so what, when the kids do this, what is it that you want them to learn from this activity, right? And you can take the conversation in two different directions. This conversation goes in the direction of, pretend this is a thing from Mars and tell me about what you learned about Mars from looking at this candy bar, right? And that's one way to have the conversation, but it's not the only way, right? And what I think what we're struggling with right now in this conversation is the challenge here is that this doesn't really match the way what they would find on Mars. So if you're going to have that conversation, probably better to have it in terms of how this is different than the types of rocks you would find on Mars, right? Or it's not Mars, it's not cold, it's not. But the other way to have the conversation is the process that you go through to gather information about this candy bar and how that process relates to the process that you have to go through to gather information from a rock sample on Mars.
And I think most kids have not had the experience of seeing core, samples being taken. So this is an opportunity for hands-on, taking a core sample.
Right.
And a curiosity, being able to have that ability to take core samples.
That's right. And so then the conversation becomes, okay, you took a core sample using a straw. What does the straw represent that you could put onto your rover that could take core samples? What would it have to include? And then the kids are talking about, well, we're going to need a way to get into the surface, right? We need a drill. We need a way to pull things out. We need suction. We need, and those are the conversations at this stage that you want your kid's having, because the next stage is building the thing, right? And you can, the difference between good and bad, let's not say that. The difference between good and excellence, right? You know, is the degree to which the kids have thought through the doohickeys that they connect to their rover, right? If you put a plastic tube on it the judge asks you, why'd you put a plastic tube on your thing? And they say, well, it's cool. That's If they say, well, that's our core sampler, and it had to have a hard edge because it has to get through the ground, and it has to have this tube hanging off the back to suction the thing up into the examination chamber. You know, it's the points are going to go way up, right? And not that we care about that, but at the end of the day, right, we want the kids to think through the process. And this thing is way more about, or should be, in my view, way more about the tools they're using than trying to jam how is a candy bar similar to a rock.
Now, if you actually wanted to go down the other road, you could do something that some teachers I know who are really kind of have uncooperative nutritionists. They have their 8th graders make a model of a stratigraphic rock sample, a stratified rock sample with different clays, and then another class that's doing Mars Rover, they take those samples, you cut them up, and then they have clays that, a stratified rock sample artificial stratified rock sample made out of red and brown clays is going to look a whole lot like a Mars rock. And so you can both explore the process and explore some of the ways you investigate the substance. So this lesson expands as you get into it. It's actually hard to figure out how to teach in hands-on investigation of the surface of Mars here on Earth. Now, Nina had some comments about sort of down the road toward the end, but she has only a limited time here. She wanted to tell you about some resources.
Oh, I found this wonderful place a couple of Saturdays ago. It's called Reuse Houston, and it's a warehouse about 6 times the size of the room we're in. And if you're looking for plastic tubing, if you're looking for wiring, if you're looking for just about any building supply, free, absolutely free. So it does not take away from the cost. So you have a maximum cost. I think it's $25.
Mm-hmm.
So all this is free. You take your tax exempt ID there. It's on North Main, 610 North Main area. It's called Reuse Houston. And,
is that the one where you have whatever you can fit in the bag?
I took a truck.
Oh.
So it's whatever. If you have a tax exempt, it's all donated by, companies. But there's all kinds of bubble wrap, plastic.
Could you get
tubing, wiring, metal, wood, you name it. Yes.
Just on the $25, do you have to give things like a garage sale value or what its value, as long as
if it's charitably described as junk or trash or leftovers from something, it doesn't count.
Okay.
The $25, that rule is in place so that you don't go out and buy a remote control car and stick that would violate the rules in several ways.
Well, no,
you don't go out and buy, let's say, a $50 laser beam to attach to your, you can imagine, right, that kids, particularly kids in, I don't know where everybody teaches, but I know that you've got some helicopter parents that would want to really go crazy with this, and we want to keep it a level playing field. $25.
Laura, did you ever get that whiteboard marker? Look, because Laura, I was going to ask Lenina to write it on the board, the address and name and address of what you just. That way, people can write it down, and
It's a wonderful place. Every week there's something new.
Okay, so that's just a quickie of lesson 2. And I will say this, that, when Ken talked about, I guess I should stand up. I have a very bad back. When Ken talked about our pacing guide, we actually have gone beyond just beta testing this stuff with you guys. Some of us have actually taught these things to sample classes here and there around the country. I got an email this morning that I'm expected to discuss how I'm going to do this in New Hampshire sometime in the winter. I have a meeting in Plymouth, New Hampshire on the 9th of October, and I'm going, oh, really? I actually need a 12-step program for airline ticket abusers. That was a joke. One of the things you discover as you get along in years and become higher up in the faculty is that your wave function ceases to localize. You learn about a phenomenon called Schrodinger's suitcase. You're no longer certain if you're unpacking or packing. And you close the suitcase and you can either get fresh, crisp laundry or really dirty laundry, and you don't know until you open it. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. And if that sounds like a joke, it isn't. People have this problem. So I have taught this stuff all over the country at varying ones of the lessons. Lesson 2 in particular, it doesn't take 90 minutes. There's some spare time in there to allow for it being broken up into 2 classes, and you have to take attendance, there's announcements, there's all the rigmarole of starting and stopping a class, and you know as well as I do that a 45-minute period isn't. So if you teach it straight, if you have 90 minutes, you're going to end early. So what we do now, I guess I should talk to the slide, is there's several weeks of doing research on Mars. And finally, in lesson 5, which is at the end of week 2, the kids have, by this point, the kids should be in a team. And you ask the kids to pick their own question. Now, we're not terribly doctrinaire or dogmatic about what constitutes a good question. It needs to be answerable with instrumentation, and it needs to be feasibly answerable by robotic instrumentation. But the question itself doesn't have to be all that scientific. We've had winners who, well, one young lady, a team of young ladies, had parents who were in the real estate and development business. They came in and they wanted to build a rover to find a best spot for a strip mall on Mars. Now, that sounds funny until you ask yourself, okay, now wait, how do I instrument a robot spacecraft to make those measurements? Then it becomes really hard. In fact, they bit off a bit more than they could chew there, because I don't know how I would do that. A somewhat more rational group, they wanted to build just a spa on Mars. And I should say that at Bendwood, and I think the Carolyn Morris is still there, when they did this in 4th grade, in 5th grade, they had a 6-week module, Plan the Economy of Mars. So the kids said, okay, we want to build a spa on Mars. And their rover was going to look for the places where they mined the minerals for the mud packs. Now that's a rational investigation. It's soil chemistry. That's what Curiosity's doing. Detailed soil chemistry. So that is very much the kind of investigation that is being undertaken right now by both Curiosity and the probe that's the next mission after MAVEN, which is called InSight. So they pick their question.
Did we talk, I'm sorry, guys, did we talk at all about the difference, contrasting this to like a science fair?
You know, I tend to avoid that because I like to be nice, but I will.
Well, I mean, we don't, I just want to make a quick comment about it, right? Because everybody, probably most of us have done a science fair type thing with our kids. If you haven't, it's very structured around these sort of if-then kind of experimental design type questions. And I just want to point out, our approach here is different, right? We're looking at the engineering practices, right? And so the questions that we're looking at are much more about exploration than they are about experimental design. So
It's more about exploration and testing a hypothesis.
exactly.
Well, nobody in the real world of science starts with a hypothesis. It does not happen. We start with questions.
We actually, I have the statement I make about science. I don't know if you're a big science fair person, I apologize, but the statement I make about science fair is I say, science fair is neither. Because it's not science and it's not really fair. So, and this is why we developed this program, which is an alternative to science fair, because we go to these fairs and it drives us crazy because it doesn't really capture the way that scientists go about doing things, right? And so, anyway, that's my little.
Yeah,
I'll say that, and so you don't.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm much uglier. I regard science fair as the beached whale of STEM education. It's gigantic. You can't avoid it. It's more abundant. It stinks. All of you are probably expected to teach it. They offer far less training for teaching it than you're getting here today. It is at least as good at alienating children from the scientific enterprise as it is. My nephew majored in electrical engineering at Dartmouth. He got a double degree at 2 institutions. I don't know how you do that in 5 years. He got a degree in physics from Colby and a degree in electrical engineering from Dartmouth. And I am both a physicist and electrical engineer. And he never once asked me a question, which is taking mother, please, I want to do it myself, just a little too far. You're already differentiated from your uncle enough. You don't have to avoid talking to him about your profession. But he hated science fair. It almost turned him off.
And a lot of our kids feel that way, right? It's very structured. They don't have a lot of choice. It's boring. It is. And not only that, but, and I know no one in this room would do this, but a lot of times the kids aren't actually doing it. The teachers are pushing the kids out of the way to make sure the science fair goes right, and that's why this is structured so that it doesn't.
Andrew, let's be nice. The teachers don't do that.
Well, the parents.
Yeah, we don't do that. We don't.
Yeah, the teachers can't.
You guys know, you do these school-wide, I taught 4th and 5th grade, you do these school-wide science fairs, and for some of those teachers, having nine out of the top 15 spots in the science fair were from my class or whatever, right? And they have it down to a system, and they run their kids through their system, and and that they might get results in the science fair, but their kids they don't leave that experience loving science. And
it's not
one of the consistent things about this is that the kids leave this experience loving science.
Yeah, we work hard to make this fun. And we're not supposed to use the fun word. It's the F word of education. You're supposed to call it engaging. Those of us who actually read and understood George Orwell when we were in high school get pretty sick of that. But anyway, this project is a team project. Science fair is one kid, one project. Real world doesn't do that. There were the Maven team of just the scientists on the Maven team is about 50 people. And there were several hundred engineers involved in building it. I have a little piece of it because I was on the down select committee that picked it. And the part that the down select committee is actually worried about is just beginning, because of the two missions, Maven actually had by far the worst analysis plan, but all the rest of it was much more awesome than the other mission. So we figured, well, okay, if they get the data, we can beat on them about the analysis plan. The community will make sure something happens good. But anyway, so it's question-driven, not hypothesis-driven. It's done as a team, and we managed to magically come up with a set of rules that pushes the parents out. In fact, a lot of teachers that do this as a curriculum keep the model in the classroom. My kids, when they did it at Bendwood, the model stayed in the classroom. All we had to do was ship drums of trash off to school. Art supplies. The following conversation was had. Mom, why are you throwing out my telemetry antenna? This is a dirty pie tin. No, Mom, it's my telemetry antenna. Can we at least wash it? So, Andrew, you're just about up here. So in space probes, once they've picked their question and begun, and this is the heart of the whole curriculum, and it was a very hard set of lessons to write, and I'll be happy to take more information, more guidance and feedback on lessons 6, 7, and 8. They're the actual heart of learning the scientific method, because you actually have to go from a question to a planned investigation. I've lost count of the number. Yeah.
Well, I'll wait till you finish.
I've lost count of the number of graduate students who failed graduate school on that issue. They pass all their courses and they can't plan an investigation. It's crucial, but yes.
The problem that I've found with group projects like this is that you can't give a group grade, and so you have to give individual grades. And so once they decide on their mission, then the different students are responsible for different parts of it, so that they could be graded on what they did, and that made it so much easier, because nothing riles up a parent more than if they got stuck with a group member that doesn't do their work and it lowered their child's grade.
Been there, done that.
Can I talk to that just briefly about this particular project? One of the strategies that we're trying to use, that we talked about using, is building the thing in a modular way so that each individual student goes through an activity or learns a particular piece, something that hits one of your teams, basically, right? And the result in using these lessons, or some of the things that you do, but the result of that, they get their individual grade, and as part of that grade, they get a piece that they then attach to the rover, right? So you basically are earning your telemetry antenna. And maybe you do that by, we're going to do a telemetry activity here. Or maybe you earn the tires on your rover by learning about force and motion. Or you earn, so you build it in that way.
So would more than one member of the group build a telemetry antenna, and then the best one gets attached, or?
Maybe, but the way I probably do it is differentiate where you've got a mission specialist working on this part of the rover,
right,
and they do the thing and they earn that for their group so that the group gets to attach it, but they get an individual grade based on whatever lesson they went through. And because you don't actually care, right? I mean, it's not that we don't care about they learn about Mars, right? But from the content and the grade part of it for your class, you're trying to hit TEEPs that may or may not be directly related to Mars exploration, right? So, but you can teach force and motion, you can teach weather patterns, you can teach, constructive and destructive forces on Earth, or, not on Earth.
Erosion is the same everywhere.
Yeah, right. You can teach these things through the lens of Mars, and they can earn things, but they can do that part of it individually, but still feel like they're contributing to their group.
The other thing we've done, we have recognized this. There's 3 other steps we take to deal with that issue, and believe me, I'm very sensitive to it because I was one of those parents in one of those really ugly meetings about, my child did all the work and he got the worst grade, and that's because, well, he didn't prepare he let one of the other kids prepare the documentation who left his name off. So I've been all the way down that road, and we do two things. One, we really don't encourage teams over 4, and the mean team size is 3.5, and that really does that's a small enough team that you can parcel out the tasks without the task being too small. We actually have one of the old lesson plan documents that Sherry Brinley wrote, practically one of the last things she did before she died. How many of you knew Sherry? She's actually the big award at Seek each year is named after her. She taught at St. Edward's School, and she was really one of the best middle school science teachers in this area. She was awesome. And she wrote a set of lesson plans for Mars Rover that are still on our website, and they include a way to parcel out the teams by topic and activity. So we have addressed it that way. And then we actually ask the kids in their written material that they submit to the judges to specify what each kid did, and balanced equal load is one of the judging criteria. So you can actually grade them on, did you spread the load out equally? Because that is a performance criterion. Okay, I'm not going to talk to this because you had enough time to read it. I am going to turn this over to my colleague in crime, who is going to take you through the awesome activity he invented.
Wow. Okay, so the stage, just to kind of set the scene here, the stage that we're at is we're in week 4, lesson 9 of this cycle, and at this point the kids should be pretty deep into figuring out the things that are going on their rovers and how that connects to the mission that they're going to do. And so we typically don't have specific activities that are attached to those particular parts of the rover because each mission is different, right? Some people are going to need certain things, some people are not, and kind of your role in this process is to come up with mini activities that fit the various things that the kids might want to put on their rovers. But one of the things that one problem every rover is going to have, it sort of inevitably, is how do you get the information? How do you send information to your rover, and how do you get information back? And so this activity is designed around that problem, and it's one of the things that you could. It's sort of a larger group activity, and you could have all of your kids sort of go through this together. So what we're going to need is teams of 4. I've got a table of 4 here, which is great. So maybe if you guys could split up and one of you could come with this group and one person could go with this group in the back. And in teams of 4, you're going to work through this telemetry activity. And in your packet, make sure I'm not a liar here. In your packet, there should be a page. This is lesson 9, and I think yeah, I'm searching for it right now, so making sure that I show you guys the right packet here. It's not that one. This one.
Lesson 9 and 4.
Yeah, which packet? Okay, great. It's this packet here.
Which one?
And it's about the one that's got the table of prefixes on it. Thank you. About halfway through there should be a page that says Mars Rover Communication. Yeah, Rover Communication. Looks like this.
Does it have a page number?
It's
Of course,
about
that would be easy.
2/3 of the way.
Okay, and so this rover communication activity is explained on this sheet, but I'm just going to run through the concept here. we want the kids are gonna design a system for sending a signal from Earth, which is gonna be represented by either a flashlight or a laser pointer. Okay, and they have to get that signal to, it's a signal from Mars. So this represents the rover. The rover is sending a signal back to Earth. And they have to get it to hit satellites, or not satellites, hit the array, an antenna array that's on Earth. And that's represented by tinfoil. What is it?
Mirrors?
Okay, and that tinfoil will be placed on Earth, which is represented by a balloon. Okay, so you've got a balloon, that's Earth, you're gonna put tinfoil on it that represents the antennas, and then you've got mirrors, which are satellites that can bounce that signal around. Okay? Now, the constraints are that, well, there's a couple of constraints. Number one, both your balloon and the person holding your flashlight, your rover, have to be rotating on their axis at about the same speed as each other. So let's say once every 30 seconds or once every, doesn't really matter. I mean, you have to be consistent, but it doesn't really matter what you decide to do with your kids. I think here it says once every 30 seconds. So that's one constraint. And the other constraint is the tinfoil and the mirrors cost money. And the whole thing has to be built, the system that they build has to be built within a budget, which is kind of outlined at the bottom here, okay? And at the end of this, once they've built their system, the group of 4 kids is going to each play a role. They're either going to be a satellite, or they're going to be the rover, or they're going to be the person that's spinning Earth. And it's a contest to see what percentage of the time is the rover in communication with Earth, based on how often is the light hitting the balloon. Okay? Now you can do wide beam or narrow beam transmissions. I prefer narrow because I think it's harder and I think it's more interesting. But if you're working with 3rd graders, you probably just use a flashlight because it's a lot easier to win. And some teachers, although I will say, like, I really don't think this should be of high concern, but some teachers with little kids get nervous about, the goal of this thing is I'm shining this thing at something that you're holding. I mean, does anybody still think that this, like, that can hurt you? That cannot hurt you? To hurt you with this thing, I would need to do like this for a while.
But it will hurt a pilot that's flying through the air.
Well, it might distract them, but it's not, you're not gonna burn somebody's retina with this thing, right? So it's not actually, this is one of those myths that floats around science teachers. This thing is highly dangerous. This thing is not any more dangerous than this thing. Okay, but anyway, I've kind of been through my spiel. Use this as your guide, and then on the next pages there are sheets for reporting data. And go ahead and with your team build this, test it out. We've got spaces out here in the hallways that are big enough that you can actually try this out. We'll give you about, Gar, do you think we have 20 minutes on this?
Yeah, we can take this right up to lunchtime.
What time is it right now?
It's 11:15.
Oh, great. Yeah, so let's spend 20 minutes and then we'll come back again. All right, laser pointer. Yes.
2 criteria. Rotation, right?
Yep.
On their axis.
Yeah.
Think about whether they are going.
I want to brag.
That is hard to model. You could, but it would get pretty. If you think about it, it would get pretty complicated. But you could do it. If you had 8th graders and you wanted to spend some time, or any grade level, and wanted to really spend some time on this, you could build this model in a very complex way. That would,
How many go? I want to ask, you said two, and that was one, and
Yeah.
the other one.
Oh, well, two constraints, the spinning and the material costs.
Well, while you're working, let me brag a little
All right,
bit
so
on
how much
Andrew.
money did we
He
get?
keeps trying to not let me.
100 million.
This activity, there are
100 million.
most of the activities in this lesson plan are a set of lesson plans, and there are like 30.
I was trying to find it.
Two of
I
them
was trying to find it.
are good from NASA with permission. We encourage you to do that.
5 million per square inch.
This one
Like how they make
was written here, and last spring, 18 months ago, when the NSTA was in San Antonio, I presented this in a bullpen session with about 8 NASA instructors, with tables all around the room. And I started, I had one table full of people doing this activity. And when they stood up and started to shine their laser beam around the room, all of a sudden, all the other instructors stopped. And they turned and looked at me and said, wait, can we do your activity? They've never seen it, and they were thrilled.
Well, thank you. Very nice. Oh, guys, sorry, I should have put this up front because it can be a big time suck for this thing. When it says on the sheet that you have a certain square inch, right, that's the cost. I then in only the square inch, you don't have to cut out 20 individual squares. You don't have to, you can, but you don't have to. You can just like cut out a big strip and estimate how much the thing costs. That would just save, just if you want to save time. I know I'm telling you that after you've already. But I want to make sure to tell everybody because I know that can be a big time suck for
I did 1 minute.
Okay, so anyway. Yeah, and that's
Even if all we have. We can angle the ropes. We are. But the mirror will allow us to do it where we need to go. Worse. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Houston, we're losing contact in.
Oh no, I talked to you 12 hours, right?
Satellite.
Yeah.
You have to go to satellite.
Every 30 seconds.
This is 10. This is going to cost us. We have a budget. That's good. Give us 2 mirrors. It'll cost us 90 million. Give us 2 mirrors. See the rest of it. We can add. We have enough to get more. We do have enough.
I just asked him if we're under the constraint of where we were in the orbit. He said we're both planets were in the orbits. No. So we have to be very creative.
I know.
And we have enough money.
Yeah.
Go to the webpage.
There's no constraint on that. Okay, and I'm gonna add, because we have enough money to get two of these, so that way one of each be a satellite.
And you can cut that one into a half inch. Or a quarter inch. Or
Spread them out.
Right.
It's that thing where you can put it up.
It means that the laser beam.
I think maybe if we do.
So we're gonna touch this one, I'm gonna measure another, get another,
Down the way?
And that way.
Yeah.
Well, you want to try it. Or we have to spend our money, I guess.
Well, we are in the US government. We're just.
No, you're
We have enough money, because we like to maximize our spending, so we're just gonna, we're gonna get these. Money's all right here.
How much we have there?
Here's your last.
We're just gonna put it flat.
No, we're just gonna take it from the back side. So that's all we got. Then you got two mirrors, one each, one of us will be good. We figured it out. You got it, you mastered this.
Nice. Well, wait till you try it the first time.
Oh, no. I think we're good.
You got this. All right, cool.
I like that you guys are doing the table size.
Yeah.
We're trying to be like, there it goes now, right there. That's it now.
I'll look there now.
Yeah.
We're also gonna do like this.
I hear, I see there.
Our basic setup is that you take Mars and Earth and you separate them by like.
That's what it's on
Just to
there.
get this
It's on the blue.
So you stand
So that
up.
we can't see the
I've got
thing.
all sides one person is hold in, whoever's holding the laser pointer is.
We don't even need it.
And whoever's standing up.
Okay, we don't even
They're
need
like that. I don't think they've come up with what we came up with, but you never know.
There we go.
They might come up with
Okay,
something
so
better.
if you have like this, and you put them in the middle, it's gonna.
Well, but I might not be here on Mars. I don't know where Mars.
What about another little short piece?
Yeah, these two are gonna be about 15 feet. You have the,
Okay,
yeah. Wow. Hey, at least you guys, like I said, at least you did it.
Yeah, so that we lost. We lost it.
One of the other.
Where, that's max, yeah, it's extra money, it was extra 10 million, we can't do anything with it, so might as well.
Another extension of this thing is to get them to draw a street light. Show me what this is gonna look like on paper before they actually go out here, and then if you revise that. And that's what it is.
We'll go back all the different ideas.
Okay, we're gonna have to show you
Just do it at a lower spot.
that. Oh, let's do it at a lower level.
Closer to the
Let's go
pole.
northern hemisphere.
Where you do have this other little piece though, so that will give us some more space.
Hold it down.
Yeah.
No, he's testing it,
Oh,
he doesn't want it to
No, I don't want to stick it yet,
Oh, I
until we
see.
know where we
So,
want
yeah.
it, because I'm afraid we may lose our investment here. That's $100 million down the drain.
Yeah, that's 60 million of foam right there, or foil right there. That's a lot of money.
It's a little bit more than I make as a teacher.
Isn't that right? Isn't that right? Okay, is there no way to let it even?
Well, what if you turn it over? One thing, turn it this way, and then go around here.
And let that be the northern hemisphere?
Yeah, I just think that's
Closer
an
to the-
easier shape to handle.
So we're looking at about right there. Okay, fair enough.
Do you want me to mark it?
I like, well, or just, yeah.
So that you know where to, if you just put, you just want to take it?
I think just a hair, but.
Oh, that's pretty darn close. Wow.
Okay. There we go.
It's a small spot, but we have 24 hours, so if you take this angle of the satellites correctly.
Okay. I'm gonna do that. I would prefer not to rotate every 30 seconds.
Well, that's the magic of this. This can do the rotating and you don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
So if we can tilt the Earth so that when we rotate, it stays at the same spot. That would be the preferred.
Okay, so I'll stand in one spot.
I thought y'all were over budget. And then we did.
Now this one, when the rover, because this planet's gonna move.
Where are the mirrors? What are the mirrors?
They're satellites.
They're
So
satellites.
the satellites will be like
The
this.
satellites will stay in the same place?
Yeah, they can tilt, but they can't like walk around.
Okay.
They're
So as
in
long as the rover.
a geosynchronous
So
orbit.
who's the sat? Who's gonna be the rover? Who's gonna be the satellite? Which one would you like?
Pioneer plane.
Awesome. This is-
Yeah,
So now Mars has to rotate, right?
okay, do we,
What's Mars doing?
yeah, Mars has to rotate, that was what I was trying to avoid. Let's rotate on the axis, so.
So I'm gonna have to be going in a circle anyways, because the rover's gonna be like here, and you won't even be able to see
Right.
the signal anyway. So now,
Right.
I come around.
Okay.
Now, you gotta hit. You've got to hit the satellite.
I got this satellite.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, sir.
So that would be like the one from.
Okay, oh, so is
Right,
that, and that
now
was
you
hitting,
need to tilt your satellite.
No, I'm on it.
Oh, you are?
I'm on it here. See, look. See, I'm hitting. Blah, blah.
and are you
Yeah, I'm
hitting
on
me?
it.
Okay, now you, there you go.
And hold on, stop for it.
Okay.
Bingo. We're good.
And we have reception now for at least a day.
Yeah.
Until
But you
Mars
gotta
moves
keep
over
turning.
here.
But you gotta keep
The
turning.
aluminum is really, it's so narrow, it's really hard to hit.
I can see you hitting her through the reflection that I'm getting.
Right, but I'm not always hitting the aluminum.
All right, now you gotta turn,
Faster?
both of you.
Yeah, but as I
Oh, I-
turn, you got
Mars can be intelligent.
but my rover is gonna do this, so as Mars,
Can you
as
just
Mars
do
turns,
this?
my signal.
Right, your signal's still gonna be hitting you.
That's
Well, I
not
know
what
you
I'm
have
saying.
so I thought.
Mars can be
In
intelligent.
one squeeze, yeah.
Right now, with Earth directly opposite your chest, you could point right at Earth.
My rover, why don't I even put in satellites?
All right,
I can just do
Now.
this.
here, watch.
Oh,
Watch.
okay.
Stand right here, stand right there. I can be a satellite on Mars.
Oh, yeah.
Mars.
Okay,
So it
so,
doesn't have
so
to,
this way,
it doesn't
so
have to
he
be a
can
double
hit
bank
you,
truck.
Right,
and you can hit her,
right.
and you can hit me, and I can.
Right, I'm a satellite around Mars, you're a satellite around Earth.
Okay.
So now,
Well, so when you get there, you hit, so,
Guys,
So I'm still gonna hit
it
you.
doesn't have to be a double bank shot.
I'm not that.
right.
no,
We're doing worst case
when
scenario.
Mars is facing away from Earth, we still want to communicate 24/7.
Right. But he can reflect
I can see
directly.
it, and you.
Right.
You
Okay.
don't have to, you do not have to, having this we're using both mirrors simultaneously is the hard way.
I agree. Yeah, we're not.
Yeah, so if I'm like here, let's see if you can hit Earth from there.
So see, our array of circling the planet isn't necessary because I could always hit directly and then when,
Yeah,
and
because
then
you
when,
have to
when the
revolve
array is on the
or
backside,
just rotate.
I can hit that satellite in order to get
Does he have
speed
to revolve
24/7.
too, or just rotate?
Just rotate.
We're good.
Yeah.
Revolve.
Wait a minute, no, so we gotta,
Now,
we gotta practice.
Mars and Earth should be about 15 feet.
So Where Mars and Earth should be about 5 steps apart from each other. Mars and Earth, just 5 steps? Yeah, 5 steps. That's my dad right here. I'm sure the kids would try the same thing. But what I mean is a regular step. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want me over here? Okay, where's my satellite? I need my. You gotta be my satellite. You gotta be Earth, right? Randy, you over here.
Yes.
Okay, there's a PDF.
I'll show you.
So here's Mars. You're behind, I guess.
Well, okay, no, I
Mars.
need,
Yeah.
okay,
You're
you're facing Earth.
Yeah.
And
So I'm
then
already hitting and Earth is spinning.
getting
So of
the
course,
projector.
You're hitting Earth directly right now.
I'm hitting Earth directly. Now, as I start to be at an angle, my robot's programmed to go ahead and hit the satellite.
Okay, am I?
And you're gonna
take it to Earth.
You're gonna take it to Earth.
I'm trying to take it to Earth.
There you go.
Okay, and then as I move here, now I'm going to hit here because I can't hit Earth.
Now he's ready to Earth.
We have 24-hour reception.
No, not quite, but
No, we have an hour of. And then once I come over here, my robot is now spinning back over here again. So we're good. We're communicating 24.
we're doing pretty darn good. Okay.
We have cable.
We have cable.
All right. Yeah, I like it. And in the original, that's a good idea to be around Mars.
I think
That
it's
was a
critical.
really good idea.
I think it's critical. I mean, the whole idea
Right.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Just bouncing
You
off
gotta
sections.
have the money. The Eagle landed, but the orbiter didn't.
Right.
Right. We were satellite up there.
That's perfect. But the thing now, the problem with is that we don't have relationships with all of us. So what we have now is we have our spot here, maybe one in Europe, whatever. So we're gonna have the big pockets. You can imagine, like our problem now, we don't have this. This would be perfect. We can receive signals no matter where you are.
It's also.
See, in the early days of
Yeah, we get the ocean
Mercury,
doing.
before we had these satellites, this is why you had a nice exit line in Australia.
But if you had a couple more satellites, if you had a couple more satellites.
Yeah. For communication.
And that is in First Navy if you want to take a few of those. Like that. Yes. Pardon? Oh, okay. Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's just about Nathan, yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah, yeah, just, I mean, go take a tour, for a mile, but.
All the way around here.
Yeah, these two, this one, is what was
Right, where's
That's
the
not
center,
really
right?
what's happening. So, yeah.
Right, yeah, right. So
Yes.
Oh, because they're, yeah.
Yeah, but when you have a big table.
You know, the problem is that you as a satellite, but satellites, they won't revolve around the planet. Yeah, I mean, you can only tilt, but that's not really. So this does make more sense where you won't actually have the strip.
That is more information about me then.
Or 2 or 3 in
Yeah,
case of
yeah.
weather conditions, atmospheric conditions, or whatever. 2 or 3.
Many solutions.
In fact, they can bounce, one can bounce in their ear.
But it was a good thing that because if we're not the satellite of Mars.
So obviously, there are lots of solutions. You're saying lots of proposed solutions.
You've probably seen this one already a few times.
Yeah, exactly, right. And he saw where we were wrong with our
Yeah, because he kept saying that the
Mars is
Mars is
smart.
smart.
One straight ahead.
And you don't need two satellites. 6, 7, 8.
I think the boards, especially like ice. I mean, this is nice stuff. This is exciting.
It has been historically.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it needs to be.
Because it's amazing to see last year when I started the robotics and engineering program, and half girls, I had 12 girls, 12 boys, and to see the girls take off and do better than the boys and really get into it. And then there were I had some 8th grade girls who said, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. When I get to high school and when I get to college, she said she wanted to work on prosthetics. But she would have never said that without this house. Without So it's so, I mean, it's so important.
In my career training course, I have 2 girls and they walk in on. You know, 'cause it's
Okay, guys. Well, we got like a shot. We've got about 20 minutes. Well, let's come back together and just debrief this activity.
I don't know what all slides.
Not only was there good stuff to eat in there was eye candy too.
No, it's just interesting.
That's the debriefing.
Yeah, so we'll talk through this. I'll talk through this. Okay, so just to debrief this lesson and this activity, one of the things hopefully that you realized from doing this is that the model that we're building here is scalable in that the way that the teacher decides the rules determines how much thought the kids have to put into designing their model, right? And so there's all sorts of extensions. A couple that we talked about, I talked about with some groups are, instead of using a balloon, somebody had a great idea of using your classroom globe and building in the idea of, okay, now you can only place the satellites on land masses, right? I think that's a cool extension. The idea of how far apart you make the kids stand is another way to scale the difficulty. How precise you make them be about hitting the mirror is another way to scale the difficulty. But I'd encourage you guys when you're thinking about doing any of these activities, but activities like this in particular, is think about the amount of time that you want the kids to dump into it versus what you're asking them to get out of it. And you want to ride the edge between making sure you spend as little time on the activity as you can by also getting the most out of them learning the fundamental parts of the model that you want them to learn, right? And that's different for each different grade level. 3rd graders are going to get a very different thing out of this than an 8th grader is. And you need to, if you throw the full model at a 3rd grader, you're going to lose your time, a lot of time into kind of managing that process. So scale down the model, and the activity for those kids. For 8th graders, scale the thing up and really let them go through the thing. Questions? Yeah.
Well, I've done a different activity where they were limited with their budget and I actually made dollars, each one was worth like, a $1 million and just printed it off.
Uh-huh.
So then they actually had to pay it out. And then when they ran out, they didn't have any more materials.
Yeah, and I think that's a cool thing. It's a cool social studies connection to make them think about these things, these projects happen within the constraints of a real world, right? One of the things we were talking about here, the orbiter that the Indian Space Agency just sent up was built and sent, not the rocketry part of it, but the actual satellite was built on a budget of something like $75 million, which is something like a tenth of the cost. Now, again, the scope of the mission was smaller, but it's something like a tenth of the cost of NASA's Maven that was sent, right? So, and I know I'm not, Gar's gonna give all sorts of reasons why that's not just, but it is important to remember this is happening in the constraints of a real world where minimizing cost is a thing. It's part of the environment in which these engineers and these scientists are operating.
To be fair to my friends on the Maven team, the per gram of scientific instrument cost is about the same. There are only 15 kilograms of instruments on the Indian orbiter, and there are about 300 kilograms of instruments on Maven. So on a per gram of instruments basis, Maven's actually cheaper. And you know why? Because a scientific instrument, you want to budget a scientific instrument? You want a number that's going to be accurate within a factor of 2, just right off the top of your head? Take the mass and multiply by the current price of gold. Spacecraft, handcrafted electronic spacecraft are literally worth their weight in gold. And that you'll come close with that. If you have no idea what your instrument's going to cost and you're proposing, that's the algorithm we use. It's how we construct what are known as WAGs, wild ass guesses.
Randy had a good suggestion about bouncing off of her idea with the money. And Randy said, what you could do is you could do the idea that she had with the money, and then they would have to earn that through their research or the vocabulary, whatever it is you're trying to get them to do. They would have to earn their money so that they can purchase the mirrors and the parts. And then that's a good incentive to get the kids to, want to do some things that maybe they don't want to do. The research.
You could do that. You could do that with the whole rover, right? You could have a box of wheels and a box of antennas and a box of things they want to use to build their rover, and you could dole them out as rewards for doing the things that.
If you did something, get a wheel.
Yeah.
Well, first they get the money.
Or the money, and then they buy.
They get the money to buy.
Maybe they don't want wheels. Maybe they want to walk.
Yeah. Right. But you get the point, right? If you could easily turn this into a classroom economy system. It's how far down the Mars rover celebration well do you want to go? It's a rabbit hole that goes. But if you could integrate it, it would be really good.
Just not like you want to encourage to do it.
Right. You don't want to read? You don't want to learn about Mars?
Okay.
You got no mirrors.
If they know that if they don't do their part, their team isn't going to be able to earn that. It doesn't necessarily have to be, stellar activity, but doing the research, they have to turn it in, they get that part.
Or, some of the kids, you may find the best use of those kids' time is scrounging. Okay, we need 40 toilet paper rolls for wheels. And some of the kids you can engage them with that kind of trick. Let's debrief this slide really quickly, and then we can break for lunch. The first question. So these are true or false questions. This is our debriefing for this lesson. Some of them are really unfair because they refer back several weeks in the curriculum. I
like that though.
Oh yeah.
Go back and pick it up. Keep it track.
I'm just thinking of all the times I've given a question that referred back several weeks on a test, and have my office is full of students the next day saying, "This was unfair. That was 3 weeks ago." Yeah. Why is that unfair? So anybody care to contribute an answer? To the first one right here.
Yep, true, absolutely the same thing.
Same thing, right?
Well, they both have to deal with space, don't they?
And stars and stuff.
Stars and stuff.
Yeah, it's all the same.
What do you mean by basically? Basically.
Let's see if we can get smoke to come out of cars' ears.
Okay.
True and false. We'll have to say false.
That would be false, because astrology is basically a Babylonian religion. And if you really want to educate about that, and you're teaching in middle school and they've had IPC, you can talk about the fact that there are equivalences between conservation laws and symmetry principles. And the equivalence to the conservation of momentum is that the laws of science are position invariant, and the equivalent to the conservation of energy is that the laws of science are time invariant. And so as long as energy is conserved, astrology can't be true.
So who thinks their eighth grader is going to be convinced that?
I knew at least two, but.
Pretty special eighth graders.
Well, thank you. My children will appreciate the comment. Rovers communicate with Earth using radio waves. That's true, right? Yeah,
It's electromagnetic, so.
Yeah, so the laser beam that we're using here, so this is something that is that part of that model is probably the closest thing to reality in this whole model, is the fact that we're using a laser pointer, because essentially it's the same thing, right? That laser light is electromagnetic radiation of exactly the same type as a radio wave. It's just a different wavelength.
Now, I don't know if these are still available, but once upon a time, you could get, in a toy store, you could get actually a laser telephone. It was battery powered. I think they may have taken it off the market because they decided it was unsafe, but.
So as long as you could point to the receiver, you could talk to it and they could hear you, but if you got off, no sound.
Yeah, it was a laser. It was a kid's toy, laser telephone. So you could use that if you can still find it, because then you would really be modeling telemetry. Since we already went to the moon,
99-cent store.
it is easy to send people to Mars. Not so much. It's false. Now this one is false for a tricky reason.
The moon or the next one?
This one, because Mars has a thinner.
Oh.
This one is false. So far, the radio waves question is the only true one. This one is false for a reason that's sort of tricky. I'm not sure I like this question really, but it's false because the syllogism is wrong. Mars has a thinner atmosphere than Earth. That's true. The shape of a space probe is critical for landing on Mars. That's true, but they don't relate. The fact that the Mars has a thinner atmosphere actually makes the shape of the space probe somewhat less critical. So the question is false as posed. And the last question, so that's sort of that requires them to really think about what truth and falsehood are.
Yeah, and remember, this is for the entire lesson, not just for this activity, right? So part of this lesson is talking about the friction of air on the body of the spacecraft during entry, right? And so that's what that relates to, not the part of this activity.
Okay, so I have a question about the very first landers on Mars. They were much smaller, correct? Which was not a big of an issue with landing as it was for Curiosity. You talk about the 17 minutes of terror or whatever it was.
7.
Because that was a process that had never been used before.
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole design had to be different. Why? Because your rover, your lander was so much larger.
Yes.
So
And not only was it so much larger, but you really wanted to not tump it over. You didn't, I mean, there are various instruments inside that they didn't want going bounding along like in a giant rubber ball.
Which is how they basically did the other two.
The other three, yeah.
They put them in an air pocket in a ball and they bounced inside the other stuff.
The others could fail.
Now, the part of the reason that they couldn't use that is because it's too heavy. This Curiosity is too heavy for that technology. The required balls would have been prohibitively big and prohibitively heavy. The other reason they use this technology is, the Viking landers actually had rockets that went right down to the surface. And so for the rest of time, or until Curiosity and the rovers came along, people wondered, well, how much damage did we do to the integrity of the surface chemistry with the landing motors? So they did the sky crane in part so the landing motors didn't perturb the ground. And yeah, I mean, like I say, I was on the panel that approved Maven. And I know exactly how hard-nosed those panels are about innovation. We hate innovation. We want things that are proven. I wasn't on the panel that approved Curiosity, but I just imagine what those meetings must have been like. How many of you went to CAST last year? Did you hear Adam Stelzner? He was the keynote speaker. And Adam's awesome. He's a terrific speaker and a great engineer. And he's the guy who came up with this. And I'm going, no. But you have the world of logic has been forever changed. Because now, if anyone tells you something's impossible, you just stare at them, kind of stonily. Then you point at Mars. This means you have to know where Mars is at all times. And then you say, sky crane. Your argument is invalid. If we can do that, we can do anything. Because that is impossible. I mean, I'm a spacecraft engineer, and I'm going, what? They did that? By all standards I've ever heard of, that. Of course, the other reason that was called the 7 Minutes of Terror was it provoked a flash mob in Times Square chanting science, 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 which is pretty scary in and of itself. Who knew? Okay, so the last one is true.
After the sky crane dropped the Curiosity, what happened to the rocket that took off? Did it just run out of fuel and kind of crash?
Yeah, they flew it up and away, and they can see pictures of it.
It crashed, right? The pieces, yeah.
Okay, now what's going on?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can do that. You just got to get one of this here. On Earth. On Earth.
Okay, so this is a really good stopping point because the next activity is at least an hour in length. And so here is the time. And I may actually say some other things before we start here, because I think I actually put the next slide in the wrong place. Yeah, okay. I meant this slide to come after, so I may take time out and edit my slideshow. And it's time for human element range extension, namely lunch. And before anybody leaves, some of you may leave at lunchtime. That always happens. I put 2 URLs up on the board. One is the URL to the lesson plans. The other, the website that you normally go through to get to the entry form will be undergoing maintenance on Monday and Tuesday. which will frustrate you. In fact, you won't be able to get to the lesson plans on Monday and Tuesday because it'll be undergoing maintenance. But the entry form will be up and open. You use that. It's https://marsrover.uh.edu, no PHYS, slash, what is it? Eventregistration.aspx. The other thing is we have quite a few handouts, including posters for you to post around your school to promote this event and get students to participate that are available on the table where Laura's been sitting. And so if you leave, and also be sure and get your certificate if you leave early. I wish you don't leave early because we've got a neat afternoon ahead, but enjoy your lunch.
Is there a place that we go particularly for lunch?
What?
Directions where do we go for lunch?
It's right in the back of the room.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant we leave for lunch. I didn't know where we had to go.
Let's just make sure it's the right year. I just want to hear it. Yep, you're good. That's it.
I won't write it down, and it's there.
Yeah, there's, what's your name? Randy. Randy pointed out that you can also access the event registration page by going through the rules section of
But
the.
that's the page that will be under maintenance.
Right, and that's what I was gonna say. So you can get there now